do have a solid resource management plan, but don't call your people resources.
We should start by defining resource management. Kimberly, if I talked to you about your last job, calling you a resource manager wouldn't have been the right term to use. But as a people manager, which people was the majority of the things you managed or the majority of the resources in the organization, what's your definition of resource management and the outcomes you needed to produce?
So resources, you're right. When you're looking at a services organization, any resources or materials, equipment, people, and budgets. Anyone that's worked with me or knows me knows my response to calling people resources in certain contexts, right? But in this context, when you're thinking about services, you need to be able to plan, schedule, and allocate people across all of your projects in order to be able to deliver your promises to your clients. And you have to be able to do that in a way that keeps that people feel like they're happy, they're fulfilled in their own selves, and they're continuing to grow, which kind of ties back into like why I've always had an issue with people, someone saying people as resources, because a resource, your printer doesn't really have a personality and doesn't have hopes and dreams and goals, and people do. And so it changes the game when you're working with people as part of a services, because your people are your product, and yet they each have their own ideas of what they want and need to be happy, and you need to be able to support and fulfill that in order to be effective as an organization. So it's a little more robust to be able to manage people as your resources than it is if you're managing a technical or physical resource.
So it sounds like there's two key aspects to resource management or people management within a services organization. One is making sure there's the right number of people available and staffed on the right projects. And the second is that the people have a career path and are being developed so that they stay and grow and fulfill the mission of the organization.
Absolutely, Matt. And that ties into we've always talk about balancing in the services organization, your people, your client, and your company. And that's part of keeping that in balance, right? So how are you, when looking at your people, you have a set of projects that you need to complete across the company, right? So how do you keep your clients happy? You complete your projects on time, and at high quality. And how do you do that? You make sure you have the right people assigned to the right projects at the right time. And in order to do that, that's essentially your resource management. That's your planning and your scheduling and allocation that makes sure that you're leveraging everyone to the best of their abilities. And that's going to make you more successful. It's going to keep your clients happy, your projects on scope and schedule, which then continues to bring business back in for you.
Right. I think when you're looking at resource management, the ability to forecast, schedule, allocate, and level people are essential. And we'll talk about that more in the next sections here.
Absolutely. And don't forget about utilization, because utilization is key. You want to make sure that your people are being utilized across your organization at a percentage that keeps them busy and keeps your projects delivering on time, but that they're not over allocated, because that's going to cause people to burn out and be unhappy, right? So those four areas of forecasting, allocation, leveling, and utilization are the key things that come together to create resource management plan.
When you're forecasting people, what is the information you need in order to be able to forecast the demand for people?
Well, you need to understand what projects that you have sold, what projects you have in your pipeline, and individually inside of those projects, you need to understand the scope of those projects, like what needs to be delivered, so that you understand how many people each project requires in each client. And then, like, also what skills we need for each of those projects and clients, right? So if you have 100 people and you have 100 people worth of projects, but you have 10 people that have one skill set and you need 50 people that have that skill set, you need to make sure that you're planning for that, whether it's hiring more people or training, adding skill sets to the people that are already there based on their interests. You need to understand, like, it's not just I have 100 people worth of spots and I have 100 people worth of humans. There's more to it than that, right?
Yeah. So So if you're doing a good job at forecasting your people and understanding the projects and the demand, what what decisions could happen when you're looking at your 30-day people forecast or 60 or 90-day? What what decisions as an organization could that drive?
So for me, I think that 90 days out is a bare minimum. I really like to be able to have at least a rough pass draft of 6 months to 9 months because it's going to inform my sales process and it's going to inform my hiring decisions. So go back to 100 people. If I have 100 people and I have 100 people worth of projects for the next 9 months, then I need to hire some more people because I want to be able to sell more projects. If I have 100 people and I have, in 4 months, I only have 25 people worth of projects, then I need to focus energy around sales and marketing so that we're able to fill up our pipeline with projects and we have something for those people to roll onto when they come off of the projects they're on. And so being able to look forward and forecast like what I have and what I need and where I'm trying to go and have that picture allows me to make sure that my people stay busy and they stay fulfilled and they're working on the things that they want to work on and that I'm not committing to a client that I to deliver something that we can't deliver because we don't have the people to deliver it or that we're not, we're obviously not going to let people go. That's against our, kind of the way that we feel about the world, right? So we always want to make sure that we have things for our people to do. So we want to make sure that we're staying ahead with sales and we're staying ahead with hiring and keeping those things matched appropriately.
So good, people forecasting helps make decisions around sales investments as well as hiring investments. And it's a critical aspect of your resource management plan.
Absolutely. That's also how you can project that looking at it, especially you're thinking services. So your how you're managing how you're doing resource management, how you're forecasting forward is how you're predicting. It's not you're predicting your projects and your people allocations, which turns into predicting your revenue and your profit, right? So those are very important as well as you look at how are you running your business, making sure that you're driving towards being a profitable business. That's the core, that resource management, that forecasting is a core piece of information that you need to have in order to understand how your business is doing from moving forward from a success standpoint.
All right. So, Kimberly, we have a forecast for what's things looking like 3 and 6 months out. Let's talk about another aspect you mentioned: utilization. How does utilization differ from forecasting?
So forecasting is looking forward, essentially. It's taking all of the data that you have at hand and looking forward and presenting a picture of here's what is going to happen based on the data that you have. And you can actually have multiple forecasts if you want to be able to toggle, if I hire people, I don't hire people. If I win projects, I don't win projects. Utilization is how are you utilizing the people that you have, right? So it's part of, resource utilization is if I decide that everybody in my organization that is a billable person should be, 90% utilized and then has that 10% as a buffer for training and whatever, then when I'm looking across my organization, I want to make sure that I'm effectively utilizing people, right? And so what I mean by that is if Matt, you're on a project and your project ends in, 3 weeks. In the forecast, I see that project ends in 3 weeks. And I know maybe I have another project starting in 6 months, or I have a project starting the week after your project ends. Now, if I being effective in utilization, I'm going to try to get you on the soonest project that I can so that the gap between your projects is as small as possible. In fact, I may actually look at that and say, can I extend you on the project you're on now? Or I'm going to reach out to the customer whose project starts a week after yours ends and say, hey, I have the perfect person coming available a week early. Let's get them started a week early on your project and pull that forward and close that gap. And that can make a big difference in your top line and your bottom line because I'm paying either way for that person to exist at that point in time, right? So it's a week of time I'm paying for. Being able to effectively utilize that person and pull that other project forward a week, that's a week worth of revenue that I'm gaining versus just having the cost that week.
Right. There's there's good things or planful things that could have lower utilization. For example, someone's going to a conference, someone's working on a sales pursuit, or someone's on vacation. And then what utilization management is really key is we want to avoid the unplanned low utilization, people not
Right.
billing as many hours as we projected, gaps between projects that are avoidable, um, things like that. New people coming on and no one has a plan for what they're going to do, right? Unplanned low utilization is something that can cost and burn a lot of money because unlike other resources like supplies or materials, people have a shelf life, and once a week has passed, there's no way to build for that week again. So having a good focus on utilization is essential to make sure that people are well taken care of.
Absolutely, Matt. And it also reduces the amount of variance that you have. So as you're using that, you stepping back and looking at them, using forecasting to look forward and see how is my business doing from a health standpoint? What is my top line revenue? What are my profit margins? If I'm not effectively managing utilization, then I'm going to have a variance between what I was projecting and thought was going to be my top line revenue and my margin, and then what's actually there. Like you said, if I'm expecting somebody to work for 3 months on a project, and I forecast them for 3 months on the project, and I'm not taking into account that they're going away for a month, or that there's something else I need them to do inside of the company, or I'm projecting them at 100% capacity on the project when they really are only going to be billing 90% of their time. All of those things can cause those variances that are unexpected, which makes it hard for you to run your business effectively because you're not able to actually feel confident in the predictions of what you're doing from a revenue and profit margin standpoint.
Correct. So forecasting, right, that gives us this kind of coarse grained control of the organization. How do I invest in hiring? How do I invest in sales? Where am I going over the next 3 months, 6 months? Utilization is that fine control to say, that's great, we're headed in a positive direction. Now, how do I make sure that at a detailed level, we're actually executing as efficiently as possible, along those lines? So forecasting is essential. Utilization is also essential because it can help you get more detailed about who's going where, when, and make sure that you maximize the efficiency of the organization.
So it also allows you to build in time to take care of your people. So you can build in
Yeah,
time if you're handling it, managing your utilization planning effectively, you can build in time for training, you can build in time for conferences, and then you're forecasting against the a correct utilization plan, then you have a healthy business and you're able to visibly see the health of your business.
right. Many of the organizations we work with don't have a target of 100% utilization. Their target could be 95, 80, 85, depending on the nature of their business. But what you want to make sure is that you're doing it is in a planful way, or as planful of a way as possible, so that the 15% or 5% or 10%, whatever you're investing in your non-billable time, can be used as effectively as possible. And it's conscious decisions, not just you're letting the variables outside your control control your environment.
Absolutely, Matt. Because chances are you're still going to invest the time in the training, the time in the things that you're being planful of, but you don't want to plan for a 15% non-utilized time and end up with 20% non-utilized time because there's a 5% that's coming in from unknown factors because it's not being kept tightly in control.
So if you've got a great forecast and then you're really managing your utilization, then the next aspect you mentioned earlier was allocation. And I think allocation is like, if you think about it as, now I have a good plan at the macro level and the micro level, allocation is now I need to execute on that plan. So what are all the things you need to worry about once you've decided that this person, let's say Jane, is going to a project, what do you have to worry about from a client perspective, a company perspective, and a people perspective?
Making sure the person is available, obviously, for the length of the project, preferably, or if they're not, that you already have a plan in place to transition that. Making sure that that person is, from a skill set standpoint, the right person for that project and that client, and also from a personality standpoint. Different clients have different personalities in their space, and we have, I both experienced where we've had consultants that maybe weren't the right fit for certain clients because the personality wasn't the right fit. And so all of those factors go into how you're handling the allocation in order to hit the utilization.
Yeah, I think, if you look at it from a people perspective, it can be as simple as, did we actually communicate to the person that this is what they're doing next? Sometimes, people want to know, people want to think about
Yes.
it. So we may have a perfect resource management plan. We may have managed our utilization. And then in the allocation step, at the people level, we need to explain to them where they're going, why, like what the nature of this decision is. And a lot of times we skip that step. We spend a lot of time thinking about where someone should go, and then don't actually explain to them the reason they're going there and what we're doing. So we may put them on a project because it's helping them build a skill that they're looking for, but then never tell them, we recognize you don't have this skill yet, and here's how we believe you're going to be able to build it on this project, right? So there's the people piece of that allocation. The company piece of the allocation is, are all my systems updated? Is my system updated such that this person is going to be billed for on that? Is it updated such that we're forecasting the revenue and so forth? So at a company level, we need people to know that this person is no longer available, that they're billing to something, so we bill for it, and so that people aren't proposing them for other projects, because we may have that great communication to the person, not tell the rest of the company the person's now allocated, and then someone else in the company is going and talking to that person saying, well, I have this other project I want to consider you for, and now you've confused your people again. So that company aspect of that communication is important. And then obviously there's a client piece of allocation. If I have a person and I've decided this is who's going to that client, what has to happen between that decision and the first day that person can be working productively at the client? So I have to talk to the client, make sure that they know that the person's coming. They know to set up IDs, like if there's any like administrative things that have to happen, so that the client is prepared and the client knows the background of the person. Because if the client doesn't know and isn't doing things in a timely fashion, we could end up affecting our utilization again by saying, "Oh, this person's available. The client says they can start. We can start early on Monday, and then we didn't do all the right communication things, so they don't have all of the paperwork and IDs set up such that they're not able to start for another week, and all of a sudden we lose, our utilization goes down, and as Kimberly mentioned, we have a variance against what our forecast was. So that allocation step is kind of a detail-oriented step, not my strength, but Kimberly can attest to what it takes to build an organization that is focused on both that big picture and the details.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Matt. It's having the right people looking at the right things and making sure that all of that communication is happening in parallel as well. Because you don't want someone to find out they're going to a client because somebody from the client side emails them their new ID for the project, and that's how they find out they're on the project.
Yeah.
Hey, why did I just get an email from so and so? Oh, you got an email from so and so because you're going to the project. Sorry, we didn't
Yeah.
let you know that, right? Or conversely,
Yeah.
like you said, we send somebody, they show up on the client site, and the client's calling the account manager and saying, "Oh, why is there an extra person on my team today? Where did they come from?" So yeah, that detail step is very important.
So allocation is a lot about, once the decision's made, making all the right communications and doing everything necessary to make sure that the on the ground work can start seamlessly. So we've covered 3 of the 4 aspects of a great resource management plan, right? You know, forecasting, utilization, and allocation. All 3 of those are very company focused. They're going to affect the profitability of the company, and they involve clients and people, but they tend to be company type processes. The next one, leveling, of people, right, is really a people focused process. And whether your organization talks about it as people leveling up, or people's development plan, or getting to a certain level or role in the organization, it's a very people centric process. Well, what happens if you don't have a plan around people development as part of your resource management strategy?
Um, Well, I mean, if you're not developing and growing your people, then you're not growing your business. If you're in a services business, then we've talked about before, like, your people are your business. And so if you're not developing and growing people, either your people are stagnating, which is not good for them, not good for you, or your people are leaving because they're not getting the opportunities to do the kinds of things that they want to do, right? They're not feeling invested in, they're not feeling like they're being heard, and they're growing. Your clients are also not going to be happy, because if you're not understanding people's skills, where they're at and where they want to go, and wrapping that into how you're planning for your organization, then you're not going to have people on the right projects, which means they're not going to do their very best, right? You do your best work when you're driven to do the work, but when you're also excited about it. And so the more excited somebody is about something and interested in it, the more passion that they have around it, that's something that your clients feel. And so being able to have people focused on the things they're passionate about, growing them, building their skill sets, it makes them more valuable to your organization, makes them more valuable to the client, and it keeps them happy. It makes them want to stay and continue to invest their time in the organization. And so I think we've taken something like that idea of resource leveling, right? Those of us who've been around for more than a couple of years probably have some existing corporate trauma from the term. And we've turned it into something that's now a positive thing, right? It's not about ranking people or anything like that. It's about how do you make sure that people have the opportunity to reach the levels that they want to reach, whatever that may be. Someone may say that I don't want to be an uber super senior developer that can run the world. I want to live in this space, and that's where I'm happy, and that's fine. And that's understanding your people, understanding what they want, and providing them with that, with the framework and the space to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at developing people, and obviously, Kimberly, you mentioned if they leave, right? If people leave, your people forecast, your utilization, and your allocation work is all for naught, right? So there's a challenge there, and it tends to be that we as an organization forget different aspects of people, and everybody doesn't know it. So having systems and cadences in place that worry about, like, what has a person done in the past, not just at my organization but at other organizations. We look at that when we're hiring the person, but do we remember it a year later that says, oh, this person's an expert in this area, I just haven't utilized them in that way yet, right? So what have they done in the past? Like, what are they doing now, right? What is their current skills, and what's our feedback on that, where they can improve how they're doing and so forth? And then what do they want to do, right? So if you have someone who joined the organization and said, I'll do this, but I really want to get into this other space, knowing that can really help you find opportunities to build and develop that person, not by just sending them to training, but a lot of times there's an opportunity where we don't have the perfect person, someone who has that ambition, has been reading and learning about it. If we can put them into a role, instead of calling it leveling like a negative thing, but if they can then level up and get to the next level, that's good for them, that's good for us, that's good for our clients, and it's a really powerful aspect of your resource management plan.
Absolutely. And knowing these things, and making that planful, it also ties back into your forecasting and utilization. So if I know that a person wants to shift from, development to project lead role, right? I may then look at, okay, well, I want them to pair with someone more senior. I can plan for them to be a lower utilization, and then I'm going to pay for them to pair in with somebody on a project to learn that skill and have that as part of my plan, right? And so when I'm forecasting, I'm building that into my plan and I'm leveraging that into my plan. So I'm looking forward and I'm seeing something that's accurate, right? I'm intentionally taking a utilization hit in order to allow somebody to build the skills they need, and that's going to make them more valuable to the company and the client, and it's also going to make them happy because they're continuing to grow and learn, right? And because again, people aren't like widgets. If I run out of widget one, I can't, and I can put in widget two, right? Oops, we're out of widget one, here, have a widget two. People aren't widgets. So if a person's not happy and they leave, I can't just pop somebody else in. I can't grab somebody off the street and pop them in and not have any kind of loss of continuity. It costs money to recruit somebody. It costs money and time to recruit. It costs money and time to hire. It costs money and time to onboard someone to bring them into the fold, no matter how experienced they are elsewhere. So, it's very important to the company that you're keeping people happy and you're enabling people to do what they want to do and to continue to grow, and that you're putting people in the right places to have those opportunities, and you're building all of that into your plan so that you're doing it in a mindful way and you're able to continue to see how your business is moving forward.
Exactly. So we've talked about this resource management plan, and it's got these four key aspects, and each of them is essential and important. What you're going to start to find is that there's an entire set of data and processes that are needed in each of those four areas. So what we want to talk about now is some tooling strategies. So how do I get the tools in place so that I can do a great job at forecasting and allocation and so forth? What are the right things to put in place to make sure that the tools I have support and empower this, and make sure I do a great job and don't hinder me as an organization from achieving a great resource management plan and strategy?
Yeah, and you also don't want to have tools like such that you have to allocate an entire person to spend all of their time chasing down all of the things to give you a view of your business, right? So
Yeah,
there's actually a loop back on having effective tools in that you're actually utilizing your people more effectively as well. And your tools, having effective tools depends on the scale of your organization, right? So what works for a 10-person organization, you can probably run that off a spreadsheet. You're probably okay there, right? I know everybody, I know their name, I know where they're at, I know who's taking vacation, I know what projects, the how many couple projects you have. You don't need something that's like over tooled. As you start to grow and scale, though, you need to be able to see all of the different things that we talked about. I need to be able to run a forecast and look forward and see where is my business in the next three, 6, even 9 months out, based on, how I have people utilized, based on the allocations that we've done from there. What are my projects and my people, and how all of those fit together to be able to run the business. And so the bigger, once you get past that 10, 15% and you start rolling up to being a larger, scaling even a little bit, you need to be able to see how all of those things come together in order for any of the planning to be effective, right? So I can have all of the good intentions in the world, but if I can't see all of that data coming together in one place, and I can't see that this project starts on this date and ends on this date, and that there's a week gap in between, but the person that's, on that gap has vacation that week and I don't need to fill the gap, right? Or the person is going to be on the bench that week and I do need to pull something forward. Like all of those little pieces like that, you need to have the data coming together about your people, about your projects, and about all of those in one place, or you can't actually effectively manage any of the things that we've talked about today. And I feel passionately about that because I've actually been in a situation with you, Matt, as well, where we had tools in place where we could see what we were doing and that brought everything together. And we changed over to where we did not have that. And we had a bunch of disparate tools. And so my analogy's always been I was flying an airplane and I had all these great tools to see where I was going and make sure I didn't hit the ground and kept me on course. And all of a sudden I didn't, and everything was disconnected. And it makes it very hard to be able to effectively manage when you have pieces, parts here, there, and everywhere and you don't have one place where everything is coming together to give you that visibility to make those decisions and to be able to do effective resource planning. We've had this great conversation. We said there are some, do's and don'ts around resource management. So, what would be some of your top do's around research management?
Well, tools are essential. So do have a tool. The opposite of that, the don't is don't have too many tools. So how do you make sure that you have tools that can manage these key aspects of resource management, but you don't have too many tools, right? So one is, there's some additional do's, right? We need a capability that's interoperable, right? We need to be looking at sales data and hiring data and people data all in the same place, right? So we need a tool that's a cross section of our data, not a bunch of siloed sets of data. We need tools that are forward looking and can forecast the future and see where we're going, not reporting on the past, right? So we need things that are future focused as a set of tools, right? So those are a couple do's and don'ts around tools. There's also some, around data. Kimberly, do you want to add any do's or don'ts?
Well, I think you're right. Like there are some do's and don'ts around data, right? So you do want to make sure that you have your data is coordinated. We've talked a lot about tools and about planning, and we've made it, been a little, we talked about people, but what we haven't really talked about is that cadence that wraps everything together, right? So when we're thinking about a resource, like doing resource planning and everything that we've talked about so far in resource management, it's not about, like, we talk about planning, it's not just let's put everything down in a piece of paper, let's stick everything in a tool and then walk away from it and that's it. It's also establishing a cadence and process around that, so that process in a good way, not process in a please make it stop way, right? um, that so that you're actually be able to continually to evolve and grow it, right? So it's not a stagnant plan. So I think that a big don't is, don't think a resource plan is I wrote it down, I put it in a PowerPoint, I showed the leadership, and that's it, that's my plan, I'm going to walk away from it, right? It's not. It's a living breathing thing. Your planning is always, should always be evolving and changing and growing, um, as you're moving forward, right? So having that cadence, having clear lines of ownership. So who owns the data? Who owns keeping it updated? Who owns allocation? Who owns utilization for what groups of people or for what projects? Making sure that it's very clear, where, from where, who owns what pieces, right? So when you're handling your people and your resources, it's not just about who's delivering the project, but who's making sure from a leadership standpoint that all of these things are working together effectively and that all the steps are being taken. Because you mentioned earlier, Matt, when you talk about from the different levels that are needed to look at things, from I'm looking at it from 10,000 feet up to I'm looking at it from Joe's going to be on vacation on Tuesday and I need to account for that. As you're scaling, those are different sets of people and different um, scope of ownership. So making sure that it's very clear who owns what, and then you wrap that into cadence. That's part of that planning, and so I think that's a big do that keeps you from sliding into the don'ts of having that stagnant, PowerPoint or spreadsheet that's your resource plan.
So do be proactive, have a cadence that runs things, do make sure you know who owns what. And I think the converse to that, the big don't is don't wait till you need the data to try to assemble it. If every month you're trying to put together your resource management plan and the first task is to go get the data up to date, you're doing something wrong. You need to have in place, here's what we do daily, weekly, monthly to make sure that our data is always up to date, it's real time, and that we're able to do our forecasting, do our allocation, do our utilization planning, all at the right time, because events don't happen monthly. Events are happening every day in your business, and you can't be spending time trying to catch up and update data. You need to have a cadence that's managing and collecting this in real time, and you need tools that are supporting that and aren't um, disconnected with different time frames and so forth. So I think, if you really look at that and say, I'm going to be proactive and future focused, I'm going to get the right tools in place, then you can empower a resource management plan that makes sure that you can do the best work for your people, for your clients, and therefore you're going to have a healthy organization.
Absolutely, Matt. Do have a solid resource management plan, but don't call your people resources.
All right. Well, that's more discussion of resource management than I've had in a long time. Anything else we ought to cover, Kimberly?
No, I agree, and I think we've covered it for today.
Great. So I'm sure in the comments or questions, people may have additional topics, and we will do this again soon. But for now, I think we've got it covered. We'll talk to you later.